I can already see some comments in the live chat, so thank you for the early bird arrivals. And we're going to trust that everything's working. I see 77 of you. Hi, Lucien. Great to have all the Frites reunited again. And as usual, I'll kill a few seconds here as we let everybody get connected. So if you're watching this on the replay, go ahead and fast forward maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds to the start of the walk. Hey, Bob K, it's good to see you. Hey, Ricky, hi, Christina Consolé. It's great to see all those names. We're going to start out with a beautiful mustachioed man today, as you can see. That's another day where the old glasses are fogging up with the mask and all. Just another day at the office. Okay, well, we can probably get started. Hi, Marianne Borg. Oh, it's so great to have you, Marianne. Way over there from down under. I know it's late for you or very early in the morning, perhaps, so thank you for joining. I appreciate it. So I guess we'll get started here. Welcome to episode 123, everybody. I'm just coming back off of my long summer break. I took a proper French summer holiday this year. We were gone for almost a month. And so it's nice to get back into the flow. And with this episode, I'm dipping back into the theme of something we tried way back in episode number 63, which is called the always look up philosophy. Ever since I've been traveling and enjoying these details for many, many years, I've been saying to myself and to anyone who will listen, you got to always look up, and that certainly is the case in Paris. And so I thought we'd do another episode where I'm literally only allowed to film or show you anything that is above our heads or above our line of sight, our eye level. So that's what 100% of this episode will be unless I trip and fall on my face, then you might see some of the sidewalk. But except for that, everything today in this episode is about looking up, and that is all we're going to do. We're in the 9th Arrondissement. The previous episode, which I linked to in the description if you didn't catch the first episode of the Always Look Up tour, that was in the 7th, and we're in the 9th today. We're going to be walking up the hill a little bit towards the bottom of Montmartre. And you'll see just a little glimpse of Montmartre here at the end of our walk today. So I think we can get started. I hope I didn't misspeak. It was episode 62 was the previous, maybe I said 63 by mistake. 62 was the previous Always Look Up tour, if you want to check that out on my YouTube channel. So let's get started. We are on a street here called the Rue Notre-Dame de Lorette. We're just a little bit north of Place Saint-Georges, for those of you looking at your map, in the 9th. And we're starting with this beautiful mustachioed man, and we will zoom in a little bit on him. I marked on my map a note a long, long time ago that this street, or this collection of streets here, was very, very, very fruitful for an Always Look Up type tour. And we'll see plenty of corbels today. This is above the door of number 40 of the street. And then what I also want to do is, this is something that if you followed for a while, you know I love to point out the fact that these little lion heads here their mouths used to hold the iron rods that would support the awnings of the cafes and the boutiques and whatnot. So even though there's no cafe at this address anymore, when you can see those iron lion heads, it tips us off to the fact that there would have been an awning here many years ago. So again, continuing, only looking up. We don't have to go far to find another interesting detail. I quite like these balustrades of sorts above each of the second floor windows. And then if we look on the other side, hopefully you can make out those beautiful leafy balconies up there. A little backlit, but you get the idea. back over on our side of the street, number 44 has a beautiful, I just call these address plaques for lack of a better word. Of course, usually they're the blue enamel plaques, but very often you'll see them when the architects wanted to add a little flourish, often it was above the doorways. I can't show you the door because this is the Always Look Up tour, so I'm only showing you what's above our heads. And you'll note that the date there says 1881. The architect signed it there. And that is generally the era that we're dealing with today as far as the architecture goes. In fact, sometimes a little bit earlier than that, 1840s, 1850s. Let me back up here. It's a pretty quiet street, but I still got to make sure that I don't get in anybody's way. Thanks, Sharon. She says, I love the Look Up tours. Watching from East Texas. Welcome back, Corey. Appreciate that. If you're watching live, I'll remind you that the Super Chat function should be available to most of you. If you're interested in supporting the project in that way. Here, looking across at number 41. Subtle. Sometimes it's subtle, but lovely nonetheless. Separating the floors. In fact, how far can we zoom? I know that degrades the quality a little bit, but if you can make out in the center of your screen, that's actually a bunch of grapes, a grape motif in the very fancy Corinthian style columns that we see. But there's something else here of note. Just above the door, right like that. Sometimes you'll see these plaques here, and on the left it says gas on every floor, and on the right it says water on every floor. And that's really a great leftover vestige of the 19th century, because it wasn't until the mid-19th century that most of these buildings in Paris got the arrival of gas and running water in their homes and the apartments. And you can imagine it would have been an absolute revolution. Until then, you would have used coal to heat your home, you would have used candles or oil lamps for light, and then for cooking it was mostly wood stoves. But then with the arrival of gas, the city gas line, it really just was a huge game changer. And as you can imagine, it really added value to the properties. And so the owners of these buildings, the landlord, the city itself, well, they were very happy to advertise with these permanent enamel plaques that you had gas on every floor and water on every floor. It's interesting to note that extra phrase on every floor, because originally the gas would have been fed into just the bottom floor, the ground floor of these city buildings. And so it was essentially just to illuminate the hallways and the courtyards and the artisan workshops that were in the courtyard, and then maybe the entrance or the concierge quarters or the office. So the fact that you had gas on every floor would have been, it's almost hard for us to imagine now how luxurious that would have felt. And just the simple act of when it was dark in your apartment, all of a sudden you could just flick a switch and have light. It really can't be overstated how revolutionary that would have been. We've got a hotel here, and it's worth enjoying the awning. This is called the Hôtel Georges because we're very close to the Place Saint-Georges. I'm glad I'm doing this on a Sunday because the street is nice and quiet, so we can bounce back and forth. I want to give a shout out to Mike Slater. Thanks so much for the support in the comments, Mike. Appreciate that. As well as Pam Moore. Thank you, Pam. I'm very appreciative for the support. If you're just joining, we're in the 9th Arrondissement, and this is one of those parts of town that there just happened to be an explosion of great architecture in the 19th century, and the details are all around. Here, I want to show you, excusez-moi, look at this. These two heads that you see here, beautiful. Very subtle. These balconies are a little fancier if you see the arches up above. And even the faces. You really can spend some time with these buildings because there's a lot of depth. You don't see everything all at once. You really you can spend some good quality time with these facades. A big beautiful address plaque. Occasionally when you see the addresses displayed like this in very large or colorful or ornate numbers, they tended to be houses of ill repute, but I don't know that was the case for this one. Just might be a big address, that's all. It doesn't always necessarily mean that it was one of those types of houses. Thanks, Lori. She says, love these details. A pretty classic looking mascaron, like you would see on the side of the Pont Neuf or many other buildings of the Renaissance style. Speaking of the Renaissance style, we've come across this a lot, haven't we? The motif, particularly of the Renaissance, with the man and the woman looking at each other or in the direction of each other. So we can see that again here. It's crazy how common that is. Once you recognize it once or twice, you start to see it all around. And let me choose a good window to zoom in on, because I don't know if you made out these cherub dudes here. While we're at it, let's look back at these balconies just next door. Just stunning, so good. Speaking of so good, this is a fun one. Number 49. And look at those. Oh my goodness, so good. Whew. These are, I don't know, I'm not going to try to name those birds. I want to say pelicans, but I don't know. You can make that call on your own, but look at that. That is a balcony. We got the soundtrack and everything. Perfect soundtrack for a couple of pelicans. I want to show you some other things too here. Just the top of the doorway is a stunner. Thanks, Linda. She says she's loving the looking up tour as well. We might have to zoom in a little extra, but look at this facade. Also has the very menacing lion heads. And there's one on the other side as well. I'm getting that good shoulder workout today. 1847 is the date inscribed on this building. So it's when we talk about the mid-19th century, we're absolutely right smack dab in the middle of it. There's something else I want to mention about this building, because sometimes the 9th Arrondissement, where we are, has so much art history. Get out of the bike lane here. So much art history involved. And this building is linked to the famous Impressionist painter, Camille Pissarro. Pissarro was a Danish and French painter, and he was really at the forefront of a lot of the Impressionist style. He also knew all of those Impressionists. He was friends with Degas and Monet and Manet, and even the post-Impressionists like Cézanne and Van Gogh. He was a father figure to those characters as well. So he was a key figure in French art history and Impressionism in particular. And Pissarro lived in this building. And he had to leave for London because the Franco-Prussian War was breaking out, and he decided to get out of town. So he had about 1,500 artworks that he had created, and he left them behind in Paris to go and flee to London to avoid the war. And sadly, when he came back after the war, out of those 1,500 works that he left in Paris, only about 40 of them had survived. So it was a devastating loss to art history and to the documentation of what would have been the birth of Impressionism. He was really right there alongside all the other big names, Pissarro was. And in fact, not only had a lot of his paintings been destroyed by the Prussian soldiers, but the story has it, the Prussian soldiers would use his canvases as floor mats outside of the buildings and just scrape the mud off their boots as they were entering these interior spaces. So can you imagine that, a beautiful Impressionist Pissarro painting just thrown down on the floor, on the ground, and then just scuffing your muddy boots across it. So that's how it goes, I guess, but luckily we still have some Pissarro paintings, and he is someone who maybe doesn't get enough credit in the world of Impressionism. Speaking of great painters, it's funny, all we need to do is turn our backs to this building, and if we zoom in here, this reminds us that Paul Gauguin was born here in 1848. About a year after he was born, he didn't stay here long, Gauguin. About a year after he was born, his parents, who were politically opposed to the new president, who happened to be Napoleon III, future Emperor Napoleon III of France, when he came into power, Gauguin's parents decided to take off. They went to Peru, if I'm not mistaken. And so Gauguin would come back to Paris and live not too far away, but he only spent a year as a newborn babe here. What's interesting is during that year that Gauguin was a baby, and this is where it's crazy, it's just overlapping of art history, their neighbor over on this, at this address, would have been Delacroix. Delacroix lived here and had a studio for quite a while, from 1845 until the 56, 57. And from here, Delacroix would move famously to Saint-Germain-des-Prés to work on his famous frescoes of Saint-Sulpice, over there at Place de Furstenberg, for those of you who are fans of the Delacroix address and the Delacroix Museum. But before he moved there to work on the frescoes of the church, he resided here for many, many years. So it's just insanity. On one side, you know, behind me, we've got Pissarro. On the right hand of this view here, we've got Gauguin being born, and then his neighbor Delacroix. And he would have had Georges Sand visiting, and maybe even Chopin, and on and on and on. That's why we love this city. Nice, quiet Sunday here. For those wondering, Paris hasn't changed too much in recent weeks and months. Still feels pretty much the same. I always wonder, I wonder what's going on in all these apartments, but in particular up in those rooftop ones sometimes. We're going to let the traffic pass, and then I'm going to take us over to that beautiful one. So here we've got the end of the street we were on, the Rue Notre-Dame-de-Lorette, and we're still in the 9th Arrondissement, but it's switching to a different street known as the Rue Fontaine or the Rue Pierre Fontaine. It's got two different names apparently. And here's another mascaron motif. Merci. Sometimes the details are very tiny. So here over at number 1, a very nondescript facade looking up, but just above the door you'll see that, which is very quietly offering us A beautiful little moment. There's really nothing else of note on this facade but that little flourish above the door. Beautiful. FYI, I don't think you'll be able to view this in 1080p this time around because I'm using the YouTube app and I think they're still limiting their live stream upload speed for during the pandemic. Interesting couple of motifs. You got two different ones, one on the right and one on the left, and they repeat all the way up. Those two different ones, but this one on the left almost feels like it's got a pineapple in the center, if you can make that out. I don't think it's a pineapple, but it feels very much like that. Always looking up, always looking up. Here at number 7. You gotta go all the way up to find some good stuff, but you can see these toga-clad folks. And it's so interesting how they put those details, not on the very bottom where everyone from the street could see them, but actually quite high where you really have to make a concerted effort to see these. But I guess that's what makes them so sweet when you do finally find them. You know, just pick a random street and it becomes an absolute treasure hunt if you adopt this sort of always look up philosophy. We've got a building from 1893, so this would qualify as a Belle Époque building with no Art Nouveau, nothing too fancy in terms of Art Nouveau, much more classical. But really get your money's worth out of balconies here on this one. Funny how these streets get very, very noisy and then instantly dead quiet. This is a balcony in a slightly different style. I would describe this one as very crisp and clean. Here we got to zoom in a lot, but again, something very subtle above the windows. Above every single window, by the way. Lovely, lovely. We've got another big art address coming up here in a minute. Let me show you the address number here too. That's great. Love that. Christine says tour 123. Wow, I was there at number 11. Behind me here, if we turn around number 19, you can see right away Mr. Toulouse-Lautrec. It says he painted here during those dates. He actually lived here as well, crashing for a long time with a doctor / friend. So Toulouse-Lautrec would have been up there in the late 1800s. And then here you don't have to go far for another big name because Mr. Degas here at 19 bis, 19 and a half as it were, in this beautiful building. Degas lived and had a studio in the courtyard of this building. 1879 to 82, Degas, I'm gonna wait for the cars and back up here. Because Degas was all the way up at the top here. He had a grand apartment on the top floor. You can see that all the way up there at the top was Degas. And then he would descend down into the courtyard to work in his studio every day. Can you imagine? Now what's wild is when Degas left, just a couple of years later, right here, get my fat finger in there, just right here would have been Toulouse-Lautrec, would have moved into here and then a little bit later moved into this one that I showed you to the left. And in fact, Toulouse-Lautrec would have spent a lot of time bouncing around from different addresses just on this one street. On the Rue Fontaine or the Rue Pierre Fontaine, I believe it's called now. Look at this. So lovely. We're getting very close to Montmartre. Some good corbels here. (1884) is the date here. This big lovely building to the right of me, I included it in a previous episode. It was the home famously of the French composer Bizet, who wrote famously the Carmen opera. And I don't want to double dip because I did include this building in a previous video, but I just thought while we were here with the theme of always look up, we'll enjoy just this one balcony on the side of the quote-unquote Bizet building, as I call it. We'll toss a look down that way too. I believe that would have been the episode called Artists of the 9th Arrondissement, if you want to look that up on my channel. So we're on the last leg of the walk here. This is number 30 of the street. There's all sorts of stuff to fall in love with here. For those of you who know the candy shop in this area called À l'Étoile d'Or, very famous chocolate and candy store, this is the building of that shop. And you might catch a little glimpse of something at the bottom of your screen here. In just a second, you can see the Moulin Rouge is in our sights. But I want to show you, this is a hotel, Tim Hotel. And it's essentially a lovely little cottage tucked in between larger buildings. So that is the Tim Hotel, as in the name Tim. I thought that would be a worthy inclusion for our episode today. Here at number 31, the address of a former art supply store where Degas would have come to get his supplies, as well as Van Gogh and surely countless others. No longer an art store here that I can see, but still Very hallowed ground, that's for sure. And look at these beauties. God, they know how to do doors here. I mean, that's an obvious statement, but geez Louise. Still, 11 years later, I'm blown away by how many great doors there are. It's an eatery called Le Carrousel, and what's great here is you've got side-by-side historic plaques. The one on the right reminds us that Josephine Baker actually had a cabaret here in the 20s, Les Années Folles, the crazy years, which would have been really her at her peak. And so this establishment on the right, which now is seemingly a pretty hip little eatery restaurant, is where Josephine Baker would have had a cabaret. Can you imagine that, right at the base of the hill of Montmartre? And then here over on the left, no slouch himself, André Breton was one of the founding fathers of Surrealism, along with Salvador Dali and others. And so when he lived here and had his studio here, Breton would have received all the Surrealists. It was considered a sort of hub of that art movement. If you can see the date right in the center, this is 1930, which puts us right in the Art Deco period of architecture. And as you'll see here, this building is absolutely very Art Deco, very subdued, but there's no mistaking that style. This is a theater now. This I want to show because it's a very rare pine tree just jutting out of that little courtyard, and you just don't see that too much around these parts. And that tree has been here for a while, obviously. So that's great that it has survived the onslaught of development, not just in my time, but many, many generations. This tree has somehow survived everything that was being built up around it. What a great doorway. Just a little glimpse of sunlight for the first time today. I don't know if that's coming through on camera, but trust me, it's here, and it's welcome. Sorry for the camera work there. Sorry. So look at this here. Very rather plain, subdued facade, except this lovely little design above every window. Here we've got a slightly different style of corbel than we usually see. Very geometric in design, very, again, sort of crisp edges. And then I noticed this as well. It looks like got some apparent fire damage up there. I don't know how recent that is. Cute little spot up there. And this is Place Blanche. I know some of you know it very well. Probably feels like you're coming home a little bit as we walk into this square, Place Blanche. At the very end of the Rue Fontaine, or Rue Pierre Fontaine, are these gorgeous, speaking of a view of Moulin Rouge, my goodness, can you imagine that? I mean, yeah, certainly a lot of commotion here as well, which must be the downside of living on this corner. But I imagine when you wake up in the morning and the crowds aren't here yet, and the sun's coming through and you just got a view of the cabaret, that must be quite nice. And I guess we'll finish, oh, actually, while we're looking at corner balconies. I've always loved these ones as well. Look at that with the street lamp composition. Oh my goodness. Must be paying a pretty penny for those, I gotta say. Thank you, Adrian, for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Okay, folks, we're gonna wrap things up here. Maybe one last look at the Moulin Rouge, and I don't know if you noticed yet, but it's covered with scaffolding because they're giving it a paint job and perhaps some other repairs. So that's pretty rare. I saw a couple of workers there yesterday, actually, when I was around here, and they were painting it. Thank you, Kristen, for the support. She says, always so informative with stunning details. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, Ed, for the support. Thank you, Daniel Molden. She says, here's a tribute to my home girl, St. Louis girl, Josephine Baker, being honored with internment in the Pantheon. That's right. Thank you, Danielle. I should have mentioned that. What a bad tour guide I am. Josephine Baker is going to be transferred to the Pantheon. That is just a spectacular bit of news. Thank you so much, Danielle, for reminding us of that. Danielle says she wishes she could be in Paris for that. Thanks, Ricky Beltran. Appreciate the support. And Nancy Brisson as well. Wow, it's flooding in here. Thank you, Jay Palmer. Okay, everybody. I think we will call this one good. If you are a Patreon supporter in my Facebook group, then how about we hop on the bike and have a ride through town like we've done in previous episodes, if you're interested. And I don't know where we're going to go, but it's on my way home, so why don't we just go have a bit of a joyride through the town and see what Paris feels like on this rather mild Sunday afternoon. So thanks, everybody, for joining me. Appreciate the support, appreciate the commitment to coming back, and thank you for allowing me my long summer break. I look forward to sharing more of the city with you moving forward. So from Montmartre and Place Blanche and the Moulin Rouge and the 9th Arrondissement and the center of the world, in my opinion, have a great day and take care of yourselves. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.